So the local environment for local authorities at the moment is really tough and really challenging. Over the last 5 to 6 years, local authorities have had to make some really significant financial savings in their budgets due to the government's drive to decrease the public spending budgets, and that's had a real impact on local authorities. Since 2010, local authorities have had to save in the region of around £20 billion, so that's an estimate from the Local Government Association, which has really shown what a tough environment and what a challenging environment it has been for local authorities. Whilst their budgets have been reducing, demands on many of their services have been increasing. Once you've procured the option that you think is going to best deliver on your outcomes, you then move into the delivery phase of the commissioning work. That's the third phase. And then finally, you'd move on to the fourth phase, which is about monitoring and reviewing what you're delivering to see if you are actually achieving the outcomes that you set out at the start. After the scoping, the next most important part of the project was the mapping of the commissioning world in that authority, if you like. And this involved the local authority's Sport and Leisure Service being really honest and clear about what they understood commissioning to be in their authority and what they thought their knowledge and understanding gaps were. And it also involved the expert advisor that we brought in to support the local authority in this process, engage with commissioners and undertake a series of interviews to really understand what the commissioners' needs were, what they were seeking to achieve, what their challenges were, to really get into listening mode so that we could really understand where sport and physical activity may be able to play a part in trying to support some of those outcomes and some of those needs that the commissioners had identified. The mapping work also undertook a desk review of all the different strategies and commissioning documentation that existed in the local authority, so that there was a really good and clear understanding of what was happening in the local authority at that particular point in time. The next part of the process was really engaging with the commissioners in a collective meeting with the sport and leisure professionals, so that the mapping information and intelligence that had been gathered could be shared and discussed in a really open forum to start to tease out what the collective priorities might be and where the joint objectives might come together. When that collaborative sort of discussion had started to take place, that enabled the project to start to identify the key, very senior people in the organisation. We're talking about the chief executive, maybe the council leader, members as well became a very important part of this process, the elected member. So what this has also meant is that local authorities have really shifted from becoming deliverers of services to much more enablers of services. This has also encouraged them to think in a much more holistic way about what they're providing in local communities and indeed who they're providing it for. So there's much more analysis and thought going on by local authorities about which of their communities really need their services and which services they should provide. It's also encouraged local authorities to think more about prevention. And that means really thinking about what they can do and invest in to prevent problems and issues happening before they actually do. So an example for that might mean if an outcome might be for a local authority around trying to keep older people living independently in their own homes for longer. What we really wanted to do was to help the sector move around the commissioning cycle so that whilst rather than just being seen as deliverers, which is clearly still really important, we wanted the sector to be seen much more as strategic influencers and engage with the decision making around commissioning as opposed to being just about delivery. The key lesson probably overall was the real importance that we need to place on developing and building relationships with commissioners. One of our fears and one of the things we had started to observe at Sport England was that potentially commissioning became a bit of a dash for cash for some colleagues, and we think that's probably a mistake. What we need to do is concentrate on building and developing the relationships that they're then sustainable so that we understand the outcomes and together we can help deliver on the outcomes. So asking lots of questions but really, really listening to where commissioners are at was really important. And that again helped a number of the projects to really understand in a much deeper and much more sophisticated way about what commissioners were trying to achieve. We all in our different sectors have our own language of how we talk and speak about things, and we have our own way of saying something. things. And sometimes that creates misunderstandings between sectors. And we really observed that and learnt that from this project. I think one other thing that I highlight that we learnt is also, and this was quite a hard lesson at times for the sports sector, was the perceptions that commissioners had about our sector. And they did see us as being at times for the sporty and not for the inactive populations. They did see us being quite facility based and perhaps about cash and income generation as opposed to helping populations become healthier, for example. What I'd also say about the lessons was that it showed us that actually while some of the lessons were challenging and were for our sector and hard to hear, actually, what it also showed us is the opportunities are vast and huge. And I think that's something that our sector is really positive about, and we are a creative sector, so that we can bring forward those sorts of solutions to support commissioners in delivering their outcomes.